The CEO's daughter went undercover as a lowly employee, but when she exposed the corrupt manager's scheme, Margaret Thornton sighed as she closed her laptop, a gentle click echoing in her expansive home office. At 68, she was far from the spry young woman who had founded Thornton Technologies over 4 decades ago. The company had grown from a small tech startup in her garage to a multinational corporation employing thousands. Yet, as she gazed out the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the San Francisco Bay, she felt a heaviness in her heart. Her phone buzzed, displaying a message from her daughter, Olivia. "Mom, don't forget about dinner tonight, 7 p.m. sharp." Margaret smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. Olivia, at 32, was the light of her life. Brilliant, compassionate, and fiercely independent. As Margaret prepared for her day, her mind wandered to the recent troubles plaguing Thornton Technology. Employee satisfaction was at an all-time low, productivity had taken a nosedive, and there were whispers of unethical practices in some departments. She had built this company on principles of integrity and innovation. Somewhere along the line, something had gone terribly wrong. Descending the stairs of her Presidio Heights mansion, Margaret was greeted by the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Her housekeeper, Elena, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, handed her a steaming mug. "Good morning, Mrs. Thornton. Your driver is ready whenever you are," Elena said with a warm smile. "Thank you, Elena. I think I'll take the scenic route to the office today. I could use the extra time to think." As the sleek black car wound its way through the city streets, Margaret's thoughts drifted to the upcoming board meeting. She knew drastic measures were needed to save her company, but what? The usual corporate consultants and efficiency experts hadn't made a dent in the problems. Arriving at Thornton Technologies' gleaming headquarters, Margaret steeled herself for another day of crisis management. Her assistant, a young man named Jason, fell into step beside her as she strode through the lobby. "Good morning, Mrs. Thornton. The board members are already gathering in the conference room. Also, Mr. Reeves from HR wants a word about the latest employee survey results." Margaret nodded, her jaw tightening. "Thank you, Jason. Tell Mr. Reeves I'll see him after the board meeting." As she entered the conference room, the chatter died down, and all eyes turned to her. Margaret took her seat at the head of the table, noting the worried expressions on the faces of her executives. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her gut. "I think we all know why we're here. Our company is in crisis, and it's time we faced it head-on." For the next 2 hours, Margaret listened as her top executives presented reports, statistics, and projections, each more dismal than the last. As the meeting drew to a close, she made a decision that would change everything. "Thank you all for your input," Margaret said, standing up. "It's clear that we need a fresh perspective on this situation. I have a proposition that may seem unorthodox, but I believe it's our best chance at turning things around." The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on her. "I propose we bring in an undercover consultant, someone who can observe our operations from the ground up, without the bias that comes with being known as a high-level operative." Murmurs of surprise and skepticism rippled through the room. Margaret raised a hand to quiet them. "I know it's unconventional, but we're beyond conventional solutions. This consultant will work in various departments, starting from entry-level position. They'll report directly to me, bypassing the usual chain of command to ensure complete honesty and confidentiality." "But Mrs. Thornton," interjected Charles Reeves, the HR director, "how can we trust this undercover agent? And who would be qualified for such a task?" Margaret took a deep breath. "I have someone in mind. Someone I trust implicitly, who has the intelligence and integrity to handle this delicate situation." As the meeting adjourned and the executives filed out, their hushed conversations speculating about the identity of this mystery consultant, Margaret remained in her seat. She pulled out her phone and dialed a familiar number. "Olivia? It's Mom. I need to talk to you about something important. Can you come to the office?" An hour later, Olivia Thornton strode into her mother's office, her long brown hair swinging behind her. Despite the family resemblance, Olivia had always been determined to make her own way in the world. After graduating from Stanford with a degree in sociology, she had spent the last decade working for various nonprofit focusing on workers' rights and corporate accountability. "Mom?" Olivia called out as she entered. "What's this all about?" Margaret stood up from behind her desk, a mix of emotions playing across her face. "Sweetheart, I need your help. Company, it's in trouble." Olivia's eyebrows shot up. "Trouble? What kind of trouble?" As Margaret explained the situation, the plummeting morale, the rumors of unethical practices, the stagnating innovation, Olivia's expression grew increasingly concerned. "But what does this have to do with me?" she asked when her mother finished. Margaret took a deep breath. "I want you to go undercover in the company. Start from the bottom, work your way through different departments. I need someone I can trust to give me an honest, unfiltered view of what's really going on." Olivia stared at her mother in disbelief. "Me? Go undercover in your company? Mom, I've spent years trying to distance myself from Thornton Technologies. Can't just—" "Please, Olivia," Margaret interrupted, her voice tinged with desperation. "I wouldn't ask if I had any other option. This company, it's not just my legacy. It's the livelihood of thousands of employees. If we can't turn things around, all those people will lose their jobs." Olivia paced the office, her mind racing. On one hand, she had always been wary of big corporations, Thornton Technologies included. On the other, she couldn't deny the good the company had done over the years. Technological advancements, the charitable initiatives, the employment opportunities it had created. "What exactly would this entail?" she asked finally. Margaret's eyes lit up with hope. "You'd start as a junior customer service representative. We'd create a new identity for you, a new name, a new background. You'd work your way through different departments, observing, taking notes, reporting back to me regularly. And the goal? To find out where things are going wrong, to expose any unethical practices, to help me understand how to make this company what it once was, a place where innovation and integrity go hand in hand." Olivia fell silent, weighing her options. She thought about the principles she had always stood for, the desire to make a real difference in the world. Perhaps this was her chance to effect change from the inside. "All right," she said finally. "I'll do it, but on one condition." Margaret nodded eagerly. "Anything. If I uncover any serious wrongdoing, we deal with it properly. No cover-ups, no hushing things up to save face, full accountability." "Of course," Margaret agreed without hesitation. "That's exactly what I want." As mother and daughter shook hands, sealing their unusual pact, neither could have imagined the storm that was about to engulf Thornton Technologies, a storm that would test their resolve, their relationship, and the very foundations of the company Margaret had built. Olivia left her mother's office with a mix of excitement and trepidation. As she walked through the bustling corridors of Thornton Technologies, she observed the employees around her with new eyes. Soon, she would be one of them. Not Olivia Thornton, daughter of the CEO, but a newcomer, starting from scratch. Meanwhile, in a corner office on the executive floor, a man watched Olivia's departure through narrowed eyes. Victor Chambers, Senior Vice President of Operations, had always resented the Thornton women. He had worked his way up through cutthroat corporate politics, and the idea of the founder's daughter potentially leapfrogging him in the succession plan had always rankled. Little did he know that Olivia's new role would soon set them on a collision course, one that would shake Thornton Technologies to its very core. As the sun set over San Francisco, casting long shadows across the city, the pieces were set for a corporate drama, would change lives, reveal long-buried secrets, and redefine the meaning of business ethics in the modern world. The stage was set, the players were in position, and tomorrow, the game would begin. The alarm clock blared at 6 a.m., startling Olivia from a restless sleep. For a moment, she forgot where she was, the unfamiliar surroundings of her modest studio apartment disorienting her. Then reality crashed back. Today was the day she would begin her undercover mission at Thornton Technologies. Gone was the spacious loft in Pacific Heights. In its place was a small, furnished apartment in the Sunset District, rented under her new alias, Sarah Collins. As Olivia, now Sarah, stumbled to the bathroom, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. The long brown hair she'd had for years was now a shoulder-length blonde bob, courtesy of a high-quality wig. Colored contacts turned her hazel eyes a deep blue. "Hello, Sarah," she murmured to her reflection, practicing the slight Midwestern accent she'd adopted for her new persona. Ready for your first day at Thornton Technologies? An hour later, Sarah found herself in the bustling lobby of Thornton Technologies, clutching a worn leather messenger bag and trying to look appropriately nervous for a new employee. She approached the reception desk, where a friendly-looking woman in her 50s greeted her. "Good morning. Welcome to Thornton Technologies. How can I help you?" "Hi, I'm Sarah Collins," Olivia replied, her voice pitched slightly higher than usual. "My first day in customer service." The receptionist, whose name tag read Deborah, smiled warmly. "Of course, Sarah. Let me just check you in and get you a temporary badge." She tapped away at her computer for a moment before handing over a plastic ID card. "There you go. Take the elevator to the 3rd floor, and someone from HR will meet you there." As Olivia rode the elevator, she marveled at how different the experience was from her occasional visits as the CEO's daughter. Then, everyone had known who she was, greeting her with deference or barely concealed curiosity. Now she was just another face in the crowd, anonymous and unremarkable. The elevator doors opened, and Olivia stepped out into a bustling open-plan office. Rows of cubicles stretched out before her, the air filled with the sound of ringing phones and the low murmur of conversations. "Sarah Collins?" a voice called out. Olivia turned to see a young man approaching, a tablet in hand. "I'm Derek from HR. Welcome to Thornton Technologies. Let's get you settled, shall we?" Derek led her through a whirlwind orientation. Paperwork, introductions, a quick tour of the facilities. By lunchtime, Olivia found herself ensconced in a small cubicle, a headset perched somewhat uncomfortably on her head as she listened to her first customer call. Remember, her trainer, a cheerful woman named May, had told her, "Most of our calls are pretty straightforward, but if you get stuck, don't hesitate to put the customer on hold and ask for help." As the afternoon wore on, Olivia began to get a feel for the rhythm of the customer service department. She handled inquiries about product features, navigated the company's labyrinthine billing system, and soothed the occasional irate customer. It was exhausting work, far removed from anything she'd done before, and she found herself developing a new respect for the employees who did this day in and day out. During a brief lull, Olivia overheard a conversation between two of her cubicle neighbors. "Did you hear about the latest efficiency measures?" One of them, a middle-aged man named Frank, muttered. His colleague, a younger woman called Aisha, died. "Let me guess, more work for less pay?" Frank nodded grimly. "Apparently they're cutting our break times and increasing our daily call quotas. It's like they're trying to squeeze blood from a stone." Olivia frowned, making a mental note. This was exactly the kind of information her mother needed. The real impact of corporate policies on the ground-level employees. As the day drew to a close, Olivia's head was spinning with new information, procedures, and observation. She was about to log out of her computer when a shadow fell across her desk. "Well, well. You must be our newest team member." Olivia looked up to see a tall, imposing man in an expensive suit standing over her. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes, were cold and calculating as they assessed her. "Sarah Collins, sir," Olivia replied, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. Something about this man set her on edge. "Victor Chambers," he introduced himself, extending a hand. "Senior VP of Operations. I like to make a point of welcoming all our new employees personally." As Olivia shook his hand, she couldn't help but notice the way his gaze lingered, making her feel uncomfortably exposed. She remembered her mother mentioning Victor in passing, a shrewd businessman with a knack for cutting costs and boosting productivity. But there was something in his demeanor that hinted at a darker side beneath the polished exterior. "I hope you'll find your time at Thornton Technologies enlightening," Victor said, his tone laden with meaning Olivia couldn't quite decipher. "We have big plans for this company's future." Big plans indeed. With that cryptic statement, he turned and strode away, leaving Olivia with a chill running down her spine. As she gathered her things and prepared to leave, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just met a key player in whatever was going wrong at Thornton Technologies. Back in her small apartment, Olivia finally allowed herself to relax. She removed her wig and contacts, feeling more like herself again. As she prepared a simple dinner, she mulled over the events of the day. The dedication of her coworkers, the hints of discontent, the unsettling encounter with Victor Chambers, all pieces of a puzzle she was just beginning to assemble. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "How was your first day?" Olivia hesitated, then typed back, "Enlightening. We need to talk soon." As she settled in for the night, Olivia's mind raced with questions and theories. What exactly were Victor's big plans? How deep did the problems at Thornton Technologies go? And most importantly, how was she going to uncover the truth without blowing her cover? Little did she know, forces were already in motion that would make her mission far more dangerous and far more personal than she could have ever imagined. As she drifted off to sleep, the city lights twinkling outside her window, Olivia was oblivious to the storm gathering on the horizon. A storm that would test her resolve, challenge her beliefs, and ultimately force her to choose between family loyalty and her own moral compass. In his luxurious penthouse across town, Victor Chambers poured himself a glass of expensive scotch, a satisfied smirk playing on his lips. "Sarah Collins," he mused aloud, rolling the name around his tongue like the smoky liquor. "There's something about you. Something familiar." He pulled out his phone, quickly typing out a message. "Run a deep background check on Sarah Collins, new hire in customer service. Something doesn't add up." As he hit send, Victor turned to gaze out at the glittering San Francisco skyline. Soon, very soon, Thornton Technologies would be his. And no one, not Margaret Thornton, not this intriguing new employee, no one would stand in his way. The pieces were in motion, players unaware of the high-stakes game they were about to enter. As the city slept, the stage was set for a corporate drama that would expose long-buried secrets, test the bonds of family, and redefine the very soul of Thornton Technologies. Weeks passed, and Olivia found herself settling into her role as Sarah Collins. The initial awkwardness of her disguise had faded, replaced by a growing sense of purpose. Each day brought new insights into the inner workings of Thornton Technologies, and with them, a deepening concern about the company's direction. One crisp autumn morning, Olivia arrived at work to find the customer service department abuzz with nervous energy. Cubicle neighbor, Aisha, leaned over with a worried expression. "Sarah, have you heard? They're announcing a major restructuring today. People are saying there might be layoffs." Olivia's heart sank. This was the first she'd heard of any restructuring. "Do we know any details?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Aisha shook her head. "Nothing concrete, but Victor Chambers has been closeted with the other executives all week. That's never a good sign." As if on cue, Victor's imposing figure appeared at the entrance to the customer service floor. He was flanked by two men Olivia didn't recognize, their crisp suits and impassive expressions marking them as outsiders. "Good morning, everyone," Victor's voice boomed across the suddenly silent room. "As you may have heard, we're implementing some changes to streamline our operations and boost efficiency. Mr. Johnson here," he gestured to one of the men beside him, "will be explaining the details of our new performance metrics and compensation structure." For the next hour, Olivia listened with growing horror as Mr. Johnson outlined a series of changes that would drastically increase workloads while reducing benefits and job security. Gone were the reasonable call quotas and supportive team environment. In their place was a cutthroat system that pitted employees against each other, with the lowest performers facing termination. As the presentation concluded, Olivia could see the shock and dismay on her colleagues' faces. Frank, the usually jovial middle-aged man who'd been with the company for over a decade, looked as if he'd aged years in the span of an hour. "Any questions?" Victor asked, his tone making it clear that he expected none. In the tense silence that followed, Olivia found herself standing up. "I have a question," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "How do these changes align with Thornton Technologies' stated values of employee welfare and ethical business practice?" Victor's eyes narrowed as he focused on her. "Miss Collins, was it? I assure you these changes are necessary for the company's continued growth and success. Sometimes, difficult decisions must be made for the greater good. But at what cost?" Olivia pressed, aware of the eyes of her coworkers on her. Surely there must be a way to improve efficiency without sacrificing the well-being of dedicated employees. For a moment, something dangerous flashed in Victor's eyes. Then, his face smoothed into a practiced smile. "Your concern is noted, Miss Collins. Perhaps we can discuss this further in private. See me in my office after the meeting." As Victor and his entourage left, Olivia sank back into her chair, heart pounding. She'd taken a risk by speaking up, but the grateful looks from her colleagues told her it had been worth it. Later that afternoon, Olivia found herself in Victor's plush corner office, trying not to fidget under his intense scrutiny. "You made quite an impression this morning, Miss Collins," Victor said, leaning back in his leather chair. "It's not often that a junior employee shows such initiative." "I simply voiced concerns that I believe many of us share," Olivia replied carefully. Victor's lips curved into a cold smile. "Indeed, and it's that kind of thinking that can be very valuable or very dangerous, depending on how it's applied." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Let me be clear, Miss Collins. Thornton Technologies is on the brink of a major transformation. Those who adapt will thrive. Those who resist." He left the threat hanging in the air. As Olivia left Victor's office, her mind was reeling. The encounter had confirmed her worst fears about the direction the company was taking. She knew she had to act fast. That evening, in the safety of her small apartment, Olivia made a secure call to her mother. "Mom, it's worse than we thought," she said as soon as Margaret answered. "Victor Chambers is implementing policies that go against everything Thornton Technologies stands for. We're talking unethical labor practices, possibly even illegal activities." Margaret's voice was heavy with concern. "Do you have any concrete evidence?" "Not yet," Olivia admitted, "but I'm close. I need more time." "Be careful, sweetheart," Margaret warned. "Victor is not a man to be underestimated." Over the next few weeks, Olivia threw herself into her investigation. She stayed late, volunteered for extra projects, and cultivated relationships throughout the company. Slowly but surely, she began to piece together a disturbing picture of corruption and malfeasance that reached to the highest levels of Thornton Technologies. One evening, as she was combing through some financial reports she'd managed to access, Olivia stumbled upon something that made her blood run cold. Hidden within the complex web of numbers and accounts was evidence of large-scale financial fraud. Millions of dollars were being siphoned off into offshore accounts, disguised as legitimate business expenses. With shaking hands, Olivia began to compile her findings. This was it, the smoking gun she needed to expose Victor and his cronies. But as she worked late into the night, Olivia failed to notice the security camera in the corner of the room, its red light blinking steadily as it captured her every move. Miles away, in a dimly lit room, Victor Chambers watched the live feed from that very camera. His eyes narrowed as he observed Sarah Collins poring over confidential documents she should never have had access to. Well, he murmured, a dangerous edge to his voice. "It seems we have a little spy in our midst." Picked up his phone, quickly dialing a number. "It's time," he said when the call was answered. "Implement Protocol Omega, and bring me everything you can find on Sarah Collins. I want to know who she really is." As Olivia finally left the office, clutching a flash drive containing damning evidence, she was unaware that her cover was already beginning to unravel. The game was reaching its climax, and the stakes were higher than she could have ever imagined. Back in her apartment, Olivia encrypted the data and sent a secure message to her mother. "I have what we need. We need to meet tomorrow." As she finally allowed herself to relax, a sense of triumph mixed with trepidation washed over her. She had done it. She had uncovered the truth. But something told her that exposing that truth would come at a great cost. Little did she know, forces were already in motion that would turn her world upside down. As the city slept, a storm was gathering, one that would test the bonds of family, challenge the very foundations of Thornton Technologies, and force Olivia to confront questions of loyalty, ethics, and identity that she had never before faced. The truth was out there, waiting to be revealed. But as the first light of dawn broke over San Francisco, the question remained, at what price would that revelation come? The morning sun had barely crested the hills of San Francisco when Olivia, still disguised as Sarah Collins, hurried into a small, nondescript cafe in the Richmond district. Her eyes scanned the nearly empty room until they landed on a familiar figure seated in a corner booth. Her mother, Margaret Thornton. As Olivia slid into the seat across from her, Margaret's eyes widened in surprise. Olivia, I hardly recognized you. That's the idea, Olivia replied with a wry smile before her expression turned serious. Mom, I have the evidence. It's worse than we thought. For the next hour, Olivia laid out everything she had discovered. The unethical labor practices, the financial fraud, the systematic dismantling of everything Thornton Technologies once stood for. Margaret listened in stunned silence, her face growing paler with each revelation. I can't believe Victor would do this, Margaret said when Olivia finally finished. I trusted him. We all did. We need to act fast, Olivia urged. Once we expose this, there's no telling how Victor will react. Margaret nodded, a steely resolve settling over her features. You're right. I'll call an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. We'll present the evidence and remove Victor from his position immediately. As they parted ways, neither woman noticed the man sitting at the counter, his face hidden behind a newspaper. As soon as they left, he pulled out a phone and made a call. Mr. Chambers, they're making their move this afternoon. Across town, Victor Chambers smiled coldly as he received the news. Excellent, it's time to spring our trap. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Margaret summoned the board members, while Olivia prepared to present her findings. As the appointed time approached, Olivia found herself pacing nervously in her mother's office, still dressed as Sarah Collins. Are you sure you want to do this yourself? Margaret asked, concern evident in her voice. We could have someone else present the evidence. Olivia shook her head firmly. No, I need to do this. I've seen firsthand what Victor's policies have done to the employees. They deserve to hear the truth from someone who worked alongside them. Just then, there was a commotion outside the office. The door burst open, and Victor Chambers strode in, flanked by 2 security guards and a man Olivia recognized as the company's head of legal affairs. Margaret, so good to see you, Victor said, his voice dripping with false cordiality. I hope you don't mind, but I've taken the liberty of calling my own meeting with the board. You and your guest are welcome to join us. Before either woman could react, they found themselves ushered into the main conference room. The board members were already seated, their faces a mix of confusion and concern. Victor took his place at the head of the table, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, we find ourselves at a crossroads. It has come to my attention that certain individuals within our company have been engaging in corporate espionage. He gestured dramatically towards Olivia. This woman, who has been posing as a low-level employee named Sarah Collins, is in fact Olivia Thornton, daughter of our esteemed CEO. Gasp rippled through the room. Olivia felt her heart pounding as all eyes turned to her. She opened her mouth to speak. Victor cut her off. Miss Thornton has been illegally accessing confidential company information, all under the misguided notion of some sort of undercover investigation. I move that we take immediate action to protect our company from this breach of trust. For a moment, the room was silent. Then, to Olivia's horror, one of the board members spoke up. I second the motion. We need to address this security breach immediately. Margaret stood up, her voice ringing with authority. Now wait just a minute. Olivia was acting under my direct orders. We have uncovered evidence of serious misconduct within the company, and... I'm afraid that's not entirely accurate, Margaret, interrupted the head of legal affairs. Produced a thick folder of documents. These are the employment contracts and board minutes from the past year. You'll find that you officially stepped back from day-to-day operations 6 months ago, citing health concerns. All major decisions, including any investigations, would have required board approval. Margaret's face paled. That's impossible. I never signed any such agreement. Your signature says otherwise, Victor said smoothly, sliding a document across the table. Perhaps your memory isn't what it used to be, Margaret. It's nothing to be ashamed of at your age. As Margaret stared at the signature in disbelief, Olivia felt a surge of anger. This is ridiculous, she exclaimed. I have proof of financial fraud, unethical labor practices, and... You have nothing, Victor cut in sharply, except evidence of your own illegal activity. I'm afraid we have no choice but to involve the authorities. The next few hours passed in a nightmarish blur. Security escorted Olivia and Margaret from the building. their personal belongings confiscated. By nightfall, the story had broken in the media. Thornton Technologies CEO and her daughter accused of corporate espionage and fraud. As Olivia sat in her mother's living room, watching the news coverage in disbelief, she felt a sense of despair washing over her. Everything they had worked for, everything they had believed in, seemed to be crumbling around them. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Margaret, who had been staring out the window, turned to face her daughter. Despite the lines of worry etched on her face, there was a fire in her eyes that Olivia hadn't seen in years. "We fight back," Margaret said firmly. "Victor may think he's won, but he's underestimated us. We know the truth, and we have allies. This isn't over yet." As night fell over San Francisco, Olivia and Margaret began to plan their next move. They knew the road ahead would be difficult, filled with legal battles, media scrutiny, and personal sacrifices. But they also knew that the soul of Thornton Technologies and their family legacy was at stake. Meanwhile, in his penthouse office, Victor Chambers savored his apparent victory. He had outmaneuvered Margaret and her meddling daughter, consolidated his power, and was poised to reshape Thornton Technologies in his image. But as he gazed out at the city lights, a flicker of doubt crossed his mind. He had won the battle, but something told him the war was far from over. The Thornton women were down, not out, and in the corporate world, as in chess, the game isn't over until the king falls. As the city slept, the stage was set for a final confrontation, one that would determine not just the fate of a company, but the values and principles it stood for. The truth had been buried, but like a seed in fertile soil, it was only a matter of time before it would break through, reaching for the light. The question remained: when the dust settled, who would be left standing? And what would remain of the once proud Thornton Technologies? The weeks following the dramatic board meeting were a whirlwind of legal battles, media scrutiny, and sleepless nights for Olivia and Margaret Thornton. Their world had been turned upside down, their reputations tarnished, and their beloved company seemingly lost to them. But beneath the surface, a quiet resistance was forming. It began with a knock on Margaret's door late one evening. When she opened it, she found Frank, veteran customer service representative, standing there with a determined look on his face. "Mrs. Thornton," he said, his voice low but steady, "we know the truth, and we're ready to help." Over the next few days, a steady stream of Thornton Technologies employees made their way to Margaret's home. Each brought pieces of evidence, emails, memos, recorded conversations, that corroborated Olivia's findings and exposed the full extent of Victor's machinations. Aisha, Olivia's former cubicle neighbor, had been meticulously documenting the changes in company policy, violated labor law. The IT department had managed to recover deleted files that showed the trail of financial fraud. Even some members of middle management, who had been coerced into silence, now came forward with their stories. As Olivia and Margaret pored over the mounting evidence, a glimmer of hope began to emerge. They might have lost the first round. The game was far from over. With the help of a team of loyal employees and a crusading journalist who smelled a Pulitzer-worthy story, Olivia and Margaret began to build their case. They worked tirelessly, often into the early hours of the morning, piecing together the puzzle of corruption and deceit that Victor had woven. Meanwhile, at Thornton Technologies headquarters, Victor Chambers was riding high on his apparent victory. He had successfully ousted Margaret and Olivia, and was implementing his vision for the company at breakneck speed. Profits were soaring, but at a terrible cost. Employee morale was at an all-time low. Ethical corners were being cut left and right, and the once innovative spirit of the company was being stifled by a culture of fear and competition. But Victor had made a critical mistake. In his arrogance, he had underestimated the loyalty that Margaret and Olivia had inspired in their employees over the years. And he had failed to cover his tracks as meticulously as he thought. The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday morning, exactly 3 months after the fateful board meeting. As Victor strode into his office, feeling invincible, he found an unexpected visitor waiting for him. "Hello, Victor," said Margaret Thornton, seated calmly in his chair. "I think it's time we had a chat." Before Victor could respond, the door opened again. In walked Olivia, flanked by 2 FBI agents. Behind them came members of the board, key employees, and to Victor's horror, his own assistant, clutching a thick folder of documents. "Victor Chambers," one of the FBI agents announced, "you're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and violation of labor laws." As Victor was led away in handcuffs, the full story began to unfold. The evidence that Olivia and Margaret had gathered, combined with the testimony of numerous employees, painted a damning picture of Victor's illegal activities. Forged documents that had been used to discredit Margaret were exposed as elaborate fakes. In the days that followed, Thornton Technologies was rocked to its core. The media frenzy was intense, with headlines screaming about corporate corruption and heroic whistleblowers. But amidst the chaos, a sense of renewal began to emerge. At an emergency board meeting, Margaret was unanimously reinstated as CEO. Her first act was to appoint Olivia as the head of a new ethics and employee welfare department, tasked with rebuilding the company culture from the ground up. Together, mother and daughter set about the monumental task of reforming Thornton Technologies. They reinstated the ethical practices that had been the company's foundation, improved working conditions, and fostered a renewed spirit of innovation and collaboration. It wasn't easy. The damage Victor had done ran deep, and it took time to regain the trust of employees and shareholders alike. But slowly, surely, Thornton Technologies began to transform. 6 months after Victor's arrest, Olivia stood before a packed auditorium of employees. Gone was her Sarah Collins disguise. She now stood proudly as herself, a symbol of the company's commitment to transparency and integrity. "We've been through a lot together," she began, her voice strong and clear. "We've seen how easily a company can lose its way when it forgets its values. But we've also seen the incredible power of people coming together to fight for what's right." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Frank, Aisha, and so many others who had risked everything to expose the truth. Thornton Technologies was founded on the idea that innovation and ethics can go hand in hand, that we can build amazing things without sacrificing our humanity. Today, we recommit ourselves to that vision. As applause filled the room, Olivia felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see her mother standing beside her, tears of pride shining in her eyes. "We did it," Margaret said softly. Olivia smiled, thinking of the long journey that had brought them to this moment. The undercover mission, the exposed truths, the fall from grace, and now, this new beginning. "No, Mom," she replied, taking her mother's hand. "We're just getting started." As they stood together facing their employees and the future, both women knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges to face, trust to rebuild, and a company culture to transform. But they also knew that they had rediscovered something precious, the true heart of Thornton Technology, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and daughter who had weathered the storm together. Outside, the San Francisco fog was lifting, revealing a city bathed in golden sunlight. It was a new day for Thornton Technologies, a new chapter in the Thornton family legacy, and a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of times, the truth has a way of coming to light. As employees filed out of the auditorium, energized and hopeful, a sense of possibility filled the air. Thornton Technologies had been tested, and it had emerged stronger, wiser, and more committed than ever to the principles of innovation, integrity, and human dignity. The story of the undercover CEO's daughter and the exposed evil manager would be told for years to come. A cautionary tale, yes, but also a testament to the enduring power of courage, perseverance, and the unshakable belief that one person, standing up for what's right, can change everything. And as Olivia and Margaret walked together through the halls of the company they had fought so hard to reclaim, they knew that this was not just an ending, but a beginning. Chance to build something truly remarkable. A company that would stand as a beacon of ethical business practices in a world that sorely needed it. The sun was setting over San Francisco Bay as Olivia and Margaret finally left the office that evening. As they stood looking out over the city they loved, Margaret turned to her daughter. "I'm so proud of you, Olivia," she said softly. "You risked everything to save this company, to save our legacy." Olivia smiled, linking her arm through her mother's. "We did it together, Mom, and we'll keep doing it, every day." As they made their way home, both women felt a sense of peace and purpose that had been missing for far too long. They had faced their greatest challenge and emerged victorious, not just saving a company, but rediscovering the values and the bond that made them who they were. The story of Thornton Technologies was far from over, but with Olivia and Margaret at the helm, guided by the lessons of the past and a vision for an ethical, innovative future, it promised to be a story worth telling and a legacy worth preserving for generations to come.